This playlist collects together and organizes the individual component modules, which together will comprise our second lecture on the rise of empirical psychology. This lecture has only 2 focal points. We'll look at empirical work that started to gain traction again on learning, memory, and overt behavior, noting that in both cases, statistical analysis plays an important role in understanding the data that's gathered. Then we'll turn our attention to behaviorism, looking at 4 major behaviorist figures. So let's pivot to learning, memory, overt behavior, statistical analysis. In the last lecture module, we saw that physiologists, psychophysicists, and researchers in mental chronometry were able to extend introspection in order to gain some intersubjectively replicable purchase on simple mental phenomenon involving perception and mental processes. However, as introspectionists, functionalists, and Gestalt psychologists attempted to extend the application of introspection beyond the tightly controlled uses to which earlier theorists put it, they found difficulty in gaining purchase on conscious phenomenon in a manner that allowed them to operationalize their categories and to reproduce data in a way that was intersubjectively replicable. The introspectionists, functionalists, and Gestalt psychologists could collect together some effects. They generated some interesting and useful devices. They came up with some clever experimental designs. But overall, their approach focusing on phenomenal consciousness failed to gain purchase on their target phenomenon. What we see with Hermann Ebbinghaus and Edward Lee Thorndike is a return to focusing on overt behavior. Overt behavior poses fewer challenges to theorists in terms of its operationalization, either quantitatively or qualitatively, and the increasing use of statistical analysis helps to identify significant trends in what otherwise might appear to be random or variable behavior. Hermann Ebbinghaus begins one of the first systematic studies of memory in 1879. He uses only himself as a subject and studies only his ability to memorize nonsense syllables by rote. He publishes his results in his book Über das Gedächtnis, or On Memory, in 1885. He studies nonsense syllables since previous learning will not influence learning of these meaningless sounds. In that choice, he makes a contribution to memory research, namely by recognizing that meaningfulness increases ease of memorization and relevance to the memorizer, and vice versa. He also documents serial position effects, like the recency effect and the primacy effect, where we have a greater likelihood of remembering the last item in the list, as well as the first item of a list. Importantly, he formulates a theoretical model of the temporally dynamic evolution of both learning and forgetting. His memory results are the basis for the learning curve and the forgetting curve. The learning curve shows that learning time, measured as the number of repetitions, increases exponentially with the number of items memorized. So the more items that you're trying to memorize, the more dramatically the amount of time you're going to need in terms of repetitions becomes. Likewise, the increase in retention for each repetition decreases exponentially so as to approach complete retention asymptotically. The forgetting curve is similarly exponential, showing forgetting decreases at an exponential rate so as to approach complete failure of retention asymptotically. Ebbinghaus quantifies these by talking about a relationship between retention and a constant e to the power of negative elapsed time divided by the strength of the original memory. This is an actual diagram from Ebbinghaus's published work, illustrating the forgetting curve, showing how recall decreases dramatically and then begins to slow in terms of the rate in which recall decreases over time.